Most of you know that Ruben Amaro is the assistant general manager of the Phillies. No, it's not a position that gets a lot of publicity, as you all know. But don't let that fool you. Ruben is involved in a lot of critical decisions affecting the ball club. Most of you also know that he is the son of the famous Ruben Amaro. and you know, we all remember him, don't we? But actually, Ruben comes from, his entire family has been involved in baseball, including not only his father, but his grandparents. I notice I'm saying grandparents, not grandfather. Both his grandparents were involved in baseball. So he's got some interesting stories that he could share with you. We at the table here have squeezed out his speech already, being the good interviewers that these folks are. We have the speech already. Ruben, most of you may not know that he was actually born in Philadelphia, and probably one of the, maybe the only Philly from Philadelphia that I know of.
Philly.
A lot of people, you know, because his father was such a famous baseball player, and because he is now an executive with the ball club, a lot of people don't realize that he also spent several years as a professional baseball player in the major leagues. Ruben is my neighbor, he is my friend, and he is one of my heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ruben Amaro.
That's kind of embarrassing, being a hero. I think you overstated a little heavier there. I have to. Good afternoon, everyone, and truly an honor. When I look at all the faces out there, wow, who's who? Growing up in Philadelphia, obviously, many of the names and the faces I recognize, obviously, quite readily, and I have to tell you, I'm a little intimidated because I don't know how articulate I'm going to be up here, but I'm sure people will be grading me on my ability to speak publicly. But thought about what I was going to say. I actually emailed Diego. I said, well, what do they want to hear? And basically, you know, he gave me a little synopsis of some of the things I should talk about. And I figured, you know, probably the best thing for me to do is to talk about myself, since I do it the best. So, us egomaniacs in baseball, you know, we revert.
Everybody here does the same thing.
Not surprising. Obviously, I have a deep baseball background, as Diego had alluded to. My grandparents, interestingly enough, my grandfather from Cuba, Santos Amaro, who is now has since passed, but he was a Hall of Famer in Mexico and in Cuba. His nickname was El Canguro, the kangaroo, and he was one of the more famous baseball players to ever come from Cuba. Interestingly enough, he was playing in the Pan American Games, I guess, way back when, and he met my grandmother, Josefina, in a tournament because she was the catcher for the Mexican team. It's a pretty extraordinary story. Well, they met, obviously, and one thing led to another, and Ruben Sr. and his brother were born, and then my father obviously grew up and enjoying baseball. My grandfather went on to be a Hall of Famer in Mexico as well, as a manager and a player. My father continued on the path and was drafted as a infielder for the St. Louis Cardinals years ago. I guess it was probably in the mid-'50s. And one thing led to another. He was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies and married a woman from Alney, and David Amaro and Ruben Jr. were born. So that's kind of the history of our baseball family. Obviously, pretty rich in baseball tradition. I've been very, very fortunate. As a matter of fact, I didn't think that I was ever going to be playing professional sports. My brother was the big, strong, 6'3" power hitter, just like my grandfather, and I was a little midget who, could run a little bit and switch hit and do a couple of things. But one thing led to another. Got an opportunity to go play baseball at Stanford University, and was drafted by the California Angels, and then traded to the Phillies soon thereafter once I got to the big leagues, and continued my baseball career. I think a lot of the things that have happened in my life and my career have obviously, as with most of you, many of the experiences, many of the things that have happened over the course of my life, and many of the diverse places I've gotten to live, and the things that I've gotten to do. My father, I took, spent some of my schooling in Mexico when my father was playing in winter ball and those sorts of things, and I became bilingual. I think a lot of these things that have happened over the course of my experience in baseball and in life really gave me the opportunity to have this position I have today. Ed Wade, our general manager, I played as Ed was the assistant GM. Then once he moved into the general manager's position in late '97, he was looking for someone that could counterbalance what he brought to the table, and he was a rules guy and understood contracts and those sorts of things. And for me, I was fortunate that I'd gone through a lot of ups and downs in my career and played on some great teams. In Cleveland, I played in the World Series in '95, and in '93, I played for the club that went to the World Series and lost to Toronto here in Philadelphia. So I had an opportunity to experience a lot of different sorts of things, pluses and minuses, and one thing led to another, and fortunately for me, Ed Wade saw what kind of work ethic I guess I had, and some of the diverse background that I had, and got an opportunity. Literally took me off of the field, and I guess I played my last game on September 30th of '98, and I was appointed assistant GM October 1st of '98, and went from wearing a uniform to wearing a suit. So I became a suit. My friends weren't very happy with me because now all of a sudden it was interesting. It was an interesting transition for me, and it took some time. Obviously, if you talk to ex-baseball players, one of the most difficult things in the world is to take off your spikes and your batting gloves and your glove and to move into the real world. And I had to do it right away. I mean, it was sink or swim, and literally on the other side of the table, because now I was negotiating contracts versus my best friends on the club, and walking through the clubhouse with people looking at me with giving me the side eye. A lot of fish eyes out there. So, but it was an interesting experience. As a matter of fact, I go back to a story where one of my best friends on the club was a bench player named Kevin Jordan. Kevin had quite a few years with the Phillies. He was, literally my Bobo, my best friend on the bench, and you always get your clicks on your team, but he was one of my best friends. He was going into arbitration year, had a very, very good year as a bench player, and we had to prepare for his arbitration case. Arbitration is such that, and without getting too crazy into the explanation, he had accumulated 3 years of service time, so then now he can, as a third-year player, can now match himself up against any other third-year player in his similar position, and to determine his salary. Well, I had to get all of this information and data against about all the negative things that he couldn't do. And now I have to negotiate a contract with the agent and then tell him how bad that player is. And then tell it to a judge with my friends sitting in front of me. And so it makes it very interesting. Fortunately for me, I did not have to go through the process with him, because I got a tap on the shoulder once we were at the courthouse steps, and they said, Mr. Amaro, we're going to negotiate this contract out. So we ended up, coming to some agreement. Thank God for me, because I called Kevin. I didn't tell Ed this, but I kept calling, Kevin, we're going to go. It's going to be, I don't want to do this to you, man. Please sign this contract. Let's get it over with, because I do not want to bash you. And he was getting kind of mad at me, I think. But things worked out extremely well. Once I was hired, and Ed Wade was brought in by Dave Montgomery as the GM, we wanted to change the face of Philadelphia baseball. I was fortunate to be part of Philadelphia Phillies baseball for a long time, because my father was obviously involved, not just as a player, but also in the front office. He wore a lot of hats in the front office as well. He was the coordinator of the Latin American scouting and basically spearheaded that part of our organization. He was also an assistant farm director under Dallas Green. So obviously we have a deep history in Phillies baseball as well. One of the things that we had lost over the 80s was the ability to really go out and procure talent through Latin American scouting and those sorts of things, and we really made a tremendous effort from '97 on to really get back in there. Now we have 2 academies, probably the best in all of baseball. If you combine the 2, and one in Venezuela and one in Dominican Republic, where Latin American scouting and player development has become very, very important to us. Obviously, with there's almost 50% Latin American players in all of professional baseball now. You can see how important it is to try to procure talent in those areas. So That was one of the things that was very important to us. Also, I think one of the things that was most important to us was to be able to get the fans to identify with the Phillies again. When I grew up as a Phillies fan in the late 70s and early 80s, obviously culminating in the 80 World Series, everybody knew Mike Schmidt, and everybody knew Larry Bowen, everybody knew Bob Boone, and everybody knew Steve Carlton, and there wasn't that turnover that had developed over the late 80s and in the early 90s. So what we wanted to do is not just to get good, but to stay good and to keep our players, the ones that we felt that were going to be franchise type players, and keep them into the fold. And at some point, once we built our own nucleus. Back then in the 70s, it was Luzinski and Schmidt and Boa, who the Phillies developed themselves, and then those players became phenomenal players later on. Well, we wanted to do the same thing, and I think we've gotten to the point where we've done that. Jimmy Rollins is an outstanding player. Randy Wolf. We have Mike Lieberthal has been with us for a number of years. Pat Burrell is a guy that was homegrown. We have several guys that are homegrown players to build a nucleus such that we can build around them. That's why we get to the point when Jim Thome became a free agent that he was our Pete Rose. He was the guy that we were going to sign to take us over to the next level. Unfortunately for us, there's some of the things that happened with regard to injuries last year and the way we started out the season. We didn't get to the finish line. Obviously, the expectations were extremely high for us last year. We didn't get there, and as all of you know in Philadelphia, if you don't reach expectations, you tend to get hammered, and that's and that happens. But certainly we believe in our organization. We believe in the nucleus of our group. We plan to not just to retain this nucleus, but to have them improve. We felt like because of what had happened over the 4 years, when we hired Larry Bowa, he was absolutely the right hire for us. He was obviously a Philadelphia Phillies icon. He did a fabulous job for us. He was the manager of the year his first year. I think it got to the point, and Larry Shank, who's vice president of PR for us, he was the one who kind of brought it to light. He said, it's interesting. Managers have about 4 years where things seem to work out really, really well, and then things kind of go back and slide backwards. And that's kind of what happened with us. Larry did a great job for us for a couple of years. Did a fine job, and obviously fiery, feisty kind of a guy. But over that period of time, the personality of our club really kind of changed, and it got to be such that we had brought in enough players, winning type players, that really didn't need that constant push. And so we felt like one of the reasons why we didn't get to the finish line, and a lot of us take the blame, myself, Ed, and players included, for not getting to the finish line last year. But and you can talk about injuries and those sorts of things. We try not to make excuses for the reasons why we didn't get to the playoffs. But we felt like it was important for us to have a new voice and a new and really kind of a new breathe some new air into our organization. Charlie Manuel is a guy who has now been hired as our manager. I had a great fortune of playing for him as he was our hitting coach back in Cleveland in '94 and '95. Probably, arguably the best hitting coach in all of baseball, and that's something I think everybody shares in baseball. But he also had an opportunity to manage that club and did very, very well. He's been in our organization for 2 years. He knows our organization. He's gone up through the minor leagues and worked with our players, and really he's given us a great perspective on our club, and he just sheds a tremendous positive light on everything that he does. He's a high energy guy. A lot of people don't know him because he was an American League guy and he basically wasn't around here in Philadelphia, but he's definitely a person that loves the game. He's lived the game. He's been in it for years and years, 50 years, I guess. He played in Japan for 9 or 10 years, was an icon there, and then came back and did play Major League Baseball for a brief time. But he's a guy that's going to breathe a lot of positive air into our organization, into our club, and we really feel like he's going to be able to take us to the next level. We wouldn't have made the move if we didn't think he could, and we had an opportunity to interview with several candidates, as many of you know. Probably 6 or 7 of those guys we probably could have hired and been happy with it, but we felt that like Charlie was the best answer for us. So we hope we're going in the right direction. We think we are. we've done a couple of things to improve what we think will improve our club over the last couple of months, and we're looking forward to spring training. But if you have any questions at all about what I do, actually one of the things that happens in my position, I kind of do fly under the radar because Ed Wade is the one that gets the blame, and he's one of those guys. He takes the blame and shares the credit. When I make a minor sign with somebody, Tomas Perez or something, he thinks it's he touts it as the greatest thing that we've ever done. So I work for a tremendous boss. He happens to be the godfather of one of my children, he's a special person to me. Obviously, gave me my opportunity to be here, but I'm very, very fortunate to work for a person who has such great integrity in this day and age when the game can be so different. To be able to work for a man like that.
Tell us about the new pitching acquisition.
We just acquired John Lieber. John Lieber is a 20 game winner with Chicago Cubs a few years back. 2 years ago, he had an elbow surgery, and he was signed by the New York Yankees. He ended up finishing up the year, I guess, with 14 wins with the Yankees, had an outstanding finish to the season, won one game in the World Series, and to us, I think he's a steal. He's a guy that he doesn't profile as the Randy Johnson #1 type of a guy, but he is a 20-game winner, and those are hard to find. He is a guy that works fast, throws the ball over the plate, does all the things that you like to have a pitcher do. We have a good defense to play behind him, and we really think he's going to be a great help to our club.
Will he be first in the dugout, or what's the rotation?
The rotation, he'll probably be #1. Right now, as it stands, although we're still working on a couple of things, right now as it stands, just to give you a little bit of information about it, the rotation goes Lieber, Wolf, Padilla, Myers, and Lytle. We signed Corey Lytle back, who did a nice job for us at the end of the year last year. And quite frankly, when we assess our club and how we did, 2 years ago in 03, we had, it was the first time I think since, 1918 or something like that we had 4 starters have 14 or more wins. The following year, obviously, you would expect to at least have that kind of production. When we had 2 or 3 of our guys go down during the course of the season, obviously the production couldn't be there. We had 3 elbow injuries where our starting pitchers kind of went south. And we had a tough year with regard to starting pitching. Conversely, we had not such a great year offensively in 03, and we had an excellent year in 04. So if we can kind of get these things together, have the 03 pitching and the 04 hitting, we'll get to where we need to be. And that's really, and that's really how we assess our club, because if we had our 2/5 or 3/5 of our starting rotation pitching like they had the year before, I think that we'd have an opportunity to be, we would have an opportunity to be in the playoffs. And as you've seen in most of these playoffs, it doesn't matter who gets in there, and it just matters that you do. And then from then on, it's who's hot and who can play the best baseball at the right time. So that's the goal. We think that we're ready to take over the NL East. It's very difficult to count out the Atlanta Braves after they've done what they've done extraordinarily, winning 13 straight division titles. But they're the ones we got to knock off, and we think we can do it. So.
What about the steroid issue? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I've been asked, obviously the commissioner's office has kind of put a gag order on most of the people, but I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I think it needs to be addressed. It is a problem, and they are doing that right now. They're going through the meetings. I'm not privy to the meetings, fortunately, but it's a problem that needs to be addressed. There's the illegality of taking drugs like that, but also the face of the game. We still believe we have the best game in the world. Others may differ, but we still think we have America's pastime, and we want to make sure we preserve the integrity of the game.
Ruben, talking about that issue, do you sense that the good guys are going to take control of the union as far as that issue goes? Because that's what really needs to be done.
I think the biggest issue, and I've been on both sides. I've been in the union, and I'm obviously on the flip side, management side now. But and I believe that there are some unrealistic people in the union that do things more so just so that they can say that they preserved, the union strength, rather than being able to look objectively at what's happening in the game and do what's good for the game. And I think the goal here should not be, yes, the union's still strong, or yes, the commissioner's office has a lot of power. the goal here is to preserve the game. That's the most important part for me, and hopefully intelligent and sane minds will prevail in that area. But I really do not know. I do not know the dynamics of the union very much anymore. Who really is exuding the power? I think more it's Gene Orza, obviously, and Don Fear. They're very, very bright guys, and they've done tremendous things for the union. But the point of the matter is that the game itself needs to be preserved, and the integrity of the game is probably the most important thing for everybody.
Tell us from the management standpoint, when you negotiate for a new player, you were talking at the table, all the different facets that you'll look into as far as negotiating for a guy, and what you give up for what you get.
Right. The whole trade, many of you, I'm sure, have negotiated over the course of time, not only with your kids, but with your bosses and stuff for your contracts. But one of the things that is probably the most difficult thing to do in all of sports is to make a trade. And the reason why is that the dynamics are totally different. Because once you place a certain value on a player that you like from another club, that club now feels like that value of that player has increased 3 or 4-fold. So the whole dynamics of making a trade, not only from that aspect, but also from the aspect of where the money has gone, many of the decisions that you have to make there's so many dynamics that occur. This is for the future of the franchise. How does this affect us in the future? Can we handle this on our budget? There's money issues, and the money has become so great, and the rules of the game have become so vast with regard to salary arbitration and free agency and those sorts of things, that can I control this player? Is this player going to help me now? Is he going to help me next year? Is he going to be around? Am I going to be able to afford him? Those sorts of things all come into play. Not only that, also what we've tried to do as an organization is bring types of players into our organization that are winning players. And to be able to scout not just their ability as players, but how they'll handle being part of our club. Will they fit in well? Is their ability so great that whether a guy is not a real good guy in the clubhouse, will that overcome those challenges that he has? So a lot of these factors really come into play, and that's why some of our scouts get paid so well, is because they're asked to do that sort of, they almost have to become private eyes in a lot of ways and try to understand, hey, this guy had a bad year because perhaps his mother was sick and it was bothering him, and maybe he'll bounce back and have the kind of year that he should have. And so we try to make our decisions based on a lot of different factors, and obviously in any sport, heart and head have a lot to do with that.
And how about the guy you're giving up?
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. I mean, you end up giving up guys. You never know what'll happen to that guy. Interestingly enough, people talk about well, that guy used to play for the Phillies. If they would have kept him, he would have been a 40 home run guy for us. Well, the reality of it is this: you cannot necessarily project what a minor league player is going to be to the T. I mean, you can have make intelligent. You can make intelligent guesses, guesstimates about what he will be in the major league level, what future will hold for him, how he'll mature, and what kind of player he'll become. But the reality of it is this: when we make trades, we actually like to have our players play well for that club, because if you just kept giving them garbage every time, you'd never make a trade with anybody. So I mean, there's that give and take. You don't want to give away a great player if you're not going to get a great player back. But at the same time, you want to be able to have the ability to do business with those people, and if you're giving quality for quality, then it works out.
Do you have any success?
Yes.
Since we are in the media, I got two comments actually. Media will step aside. Charlie Manuel and Billy Wagner come from about 6 or 7 miles apart down in rural Virginia. Is this? You think Billy's going to be a pet player now? Because of that, aside from that doesn't call for an opinion. We are broadcasters largely, one way or the other. What do you think is Philadelphia more cruel with its media, or is it just the Philadelphia hard-nosed way of doing publicity or covering the games?
It's a great question. The Philadelphia fan itself is a vastly different type of fan. I'm not talking about any of you. I'm talking about the fan. It is a very passionate fan. It almost comes at times. It becomes like one of those situations where when the expectations are high and we do not reach the expectations, what positive things have happened with the club seem to be wiped out. And that's the one most difficult thing in our organization. We were 10 games over 500 last year, but I have people come to me on the street and say, when are you guys going to be good? and they mean it, because good is not good enough. You have to be the best in this market. And I don't have a problem with that, because we demand the best from ourselves. But the measuring stick gets sometimes skewed, because success is no longer based on success. It's based on being a winner or being a champion. And, I'm sure the Eagles have gone through that. They've had troubles getting through the NFC Championship game. Now, they're having an incredible year. They're an incredible club. But if they lose it again in an NFC Championship game, Andy Reid's going to have a tough time walking through the streets of Philadelphia. And that's unfortunate, because they've had a tremendous run. Atlanta's the same way. When I talk about Atlanta Braves, they've won one World Series out of the 13 times they've won the National League East. But their greatness doesn't get measured by that. Their greatness is measured by whether or not they've won World Series. So as far as the media is concerned, I don't think it's that different from any other media. I think it's the fan that's a little bit different, and I don't know why. But the media to us has been actually very good overall. I mean, there's one radio station that gets on us a little bit, but that's part.
We mark those off.
That's part. Well, it'll be interesting to see, because we're on Friday nights with them now on the radio, so we'll see how I'm going to get on there with Angelo and see if he's
I
going
would
to.
add that Ed Wade made a wonderful choice with you.
Well, I thank you very much. Thank you.
On the Eagles, the success of the Eagles, obviously not getting to the NFC title, but they've had consistency over the last 4 years.
Right.
Is that brought up as far as the Eagles competing against the Phillies for the fan?
No, you know what, we feel like if we have success, and I've been here, when you have a successful club and when you have a playoff contending club here in Philadelphia, people will rally. I mean, it's very, very simple. I mean, I watched it in '93, I saw it in '80, and been a part of all that. So we have to make sure that we're doing our jobs to the best of our ability and not worry about it. I think it's great for the city for people to be revved up about sports in general. A lot of people talk about, well, where does the fans' entertainment dollar go to? Should it go to the Eagles? Should it go to the Phillies? If you're doing your job properly and you're having success in Philadelphia, you will get your fan. I think we've created a situation, I think, now for our fans, at least with our venues, and I think by our players, where we're an entertaining ball club, and I think that we're going to be a contending ball club for a long, long time. We need to get to the playoffs for people to jump on the bandwagon with us, a little bit deeper. I mean, that's fact, and we're doing everything we possibly can to do that. There was a question there.
I know your entertainment and sports. My wife and I spent almost 30 years dealing with children. We hope responsibly and taking seriously children's relationship to us as personnel. And barring all the things, I got to tell you, baseball has got to clean up this mess of these role models who are legends to children, and that they don't be damned. I think it's important that they get in there and not hopscotch around this issue. We have a responsibility as adults to children to at least give them the moral visage of being legends. I hope they're just tap dancing around this, and I take it very, very seriously, because I take very seriously what our responsibility to children was, and I hope they do when they're out there signing baseballs and getting paid huge salaries so that they can go to a children's club not only as somebody the children look up to, but somebody whose way of life is an inspiration to children, and there are a lot of them to whom they're the only inspiration.
No, I hear. And I am in complete agreement. We have a responsibility as athletes and people in the entertainment business to be aware and certainly to address these issues, and they need to be addressed. I don't disagree at all. We would not survive if it weren't for the children, basically, in the entertainment business, because the children become adults. They become adult fans. They become responsible, hopefully responsible adults, and you hope that they are leading decent lives. And if they're not seeing that by the icons on the field, then obviously it has a vast effect on our society. There's no question about that. We do have a responsibility. What gets, unfortunately for this, when these things happen, a lot of the things that there were, where there are some really truly professional, wonderful people in each sport who are doing things behind the scenes, not because they want to be recognized, but the people like the Jim Tomeys of the world and even the Kurt Schillings of the world who are really giving back to their communities. People never get an opportunity to really see that or focus on that. I don't know if that's societal. I don't know what the issue is there. But unfortunately, it only takes 1 or 2 guys or 5 guys to really ruin things. And it has to be addressed. I absolutely unequivocally agree with you.
Yeah, but the problem is, and I've worked closely with a lot of athletes because I produced and directed sports, including the 80 World Series, and a lot of these athletes don't give a damn about the fans.
Here, here.
And I traveled with the Rockets for one whole season, 88. I did 88 games with Charles, the first year that Charles was there. Wonderful man until he gets off the deep end and throws some guy through a window. They do that. They give fans the bird when they ask for an autograph, when they're asked for an autograph. The problem is, and nobody can control it any longer, the athletes feel they're bulletproof, a lot of them. And I don't know how you solve that problem.
It's a very
the union's really responsibility is for that too. They protected them.
And I don't disagree with you.
You've been on both sides.
Right, I have been on both sides, and giving autographs and giving back to the community and those sorts of things were important to me. My dad brought me up. I remember being in Chicago when my father was with the Chicago Cubs as a coach, and there's a little parking lot behind Wrigley Field where the players park, and you drive out of the parking lot, and as you can imagine, I mean, it's gated, and people can see who's walking under their cars and driving out. My dad would sign for 2 straight hours, sit in the... Come on, Dad, are you kidding me? And he said, this is why we're here. And unfortunately for me, I had a different person to look up to. And I agree. We have a responsibility to our kids, to our society, as athletes, to be respectful and to comport yourself in a positive manner. It's difficult to be able to, on my side of the fence, to say to the player, hey, go out there and sign autographs for 5 minutes before the game starts, please. We can tell, we do it. Whether they do it or not, contractually we can't make them do those sorts of things, unfortunately.
I was put against the wall in the Reds locker room by Tony Perez because I had Johnny Bench do the lineups for the team on a Saturday game of the week instead of Pete Rose. Bench had his own TV show, could speak well. Rose couldn't speak one word at a time. But Perez, he's our captain. Why did you do that? There's just no rationale to some of the things that happen.
Right.
Ruben, I think what you're hearing here is not necessarily the individual players, but your entire game, and I agree, it is.
Well, it's not just baseball.
I know,
it's
but
everybody.
But baseball is the national game. It's the favorite of, I expect, most people. I don't know that for sure, but I think baseball in its entity is the role model. It's not a Pete Rose or any other 1 or 2 or 10 players. Baseball has to be the role model, or it can die.
No question about that. And I think that many of the problems that now exist in baseball are probably due to the fact that there is a union that in a lot of ways protects the players. They've done a lot of wonderful things for the players, but at the same time, neither the commissioner's office nor nor the union can lose sight of the fact that it's about our game. It's not about the union, it's not about the commissioner's office. It's about preserving our game and shedding, the most positive light on our game. And I hope that at sometime during my lifetime that the two get together to the point where that's the focus and not who's, how are they splitting up the revenues in the game.
Herb and I will be glad to come and talk to you.
Ruben, about that.
I'm going to lead a crusade myself.
About the revenue you just talked about, and of course money has become a major item in all of sports. What is the current and projected revenue stream from television, network television, to the individual teams in the major leagues?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers now. Fortunately for me, I don't have to deal with those numbers. I get to deal with our $90 million payroll. But we basically, my understanding is we're somewhere in the $3.5 to $4 billion range as far as total revenue. Now,
How does that break down to the teams?
obviously, the revenue is different for each club because now they have a revenue sharing plan that's really quite intricate that we've got past this last bargaining agreement. But basically, what happens is that the union really wants to be able to take half of that, and the owners the other half. And whether that has happened, it had gotten much closer. Now I do not know what the difference is, 40-60, 45-55. But there's a revenue sharing plan such that the Yankees, because they can generate so much more revenue, for instance, and I don't know the actual numbers, but the Yankees, compared to the Minnesota Twins, for instance, Yankees can generate $500 to $600 million in revenue alone. Well, the Minnesota Twins probably $30 million. So you can see where where the disparity is, and what we've tried to do is try to get everybody on an equal playing field. Obviously, the Yankees can afford a $200 million payroll, but the Twins can only probably afford break even at a 50 or 60 or $70 million payroll, not max. So it's difficult to create the parity that they've done in the NFL. The NFL has done a great job. Now, a lot of people say, well, the NFL union's weak. Well, it can't be that weak. The game is flourishing as well as it's the NFL's made tremendous strides with regard to their industry, and it's our hope that we can get there as well. It's a great model, but they, the cap, the salary cap, and a lot of the things with regard to the laws. I mean, baseball doesn't work under the same laws that everybody else in the world does, or everybody else in the United States.
There was a question that the today's situation for the last several years, and also the projected, is that a team could operate with the monies received from their share of the TV revenue,
right,
and not have a person in the stands and still make money even at the high salaries. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. But they can operate much better. I think with the revenue sharing plan as it is, I think it's really helped the game overall. Not necessarily are the highest payroll teams, making the playoffs, or I mean, it's coming more and more becoming a decision-making process with people like myself on the baseball side, and making the right choices with talent and things like that. There's a ways to go. There's a luxury tax that exists now. If there was a cap, it'd probably be better for the game. I don't think a union will ever go for a cap. And because of the way the laws are in baseball, and because we're basically exempt from any other from labor laws, I don't know if that'll ever change unless it's changed to political level. You're getting beyond where my realm of expertise is.
Ruben, good to see you again. I was disappointed that Boa got fired. I've known Larry a long time. He's a good baseball man. I'm sure you know him a lot more intricately, more than me. But the fact is, you guys did suffer some real key injuries. Wagner, Madsen, Blanco. I mean, a lot of guys were out of there, and the manager can't go out there and hit the ball. But the tough part of this question is, how many girly men in the men's locker, the locker room, went to management and complained about Boa, as opposed to management just deciding on themselves to make the change? In other words, was there an influence from the locker room to cause the change?
There was I guess for whatever reason, there was this thought process that there were people running to Ed Wade's office saying, you got to get this guy out of here. He's, we can't handle. there was nobody who did that. Not one player did that. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but there was an assessment made by our front office, myself included, Ed Wade, others, that we felt like we got to the point with our staff as it was, that we felt we couldn't get it to the next level. And the fact of the matter remains, whether that decision was the right decision or not, we will see. We just felt like the personality of our club had changed with regard to the personality of our managers and the people running our club. And fortunately or unfortunately, just like in any other industry, I think what people tend to lose sight of is if people are not comfortable in their lot in life, whether they're getting paid $2 million or whether they're getting paid $50,000, if they're not feeling comfortable with where they are, how they're being perceived by their peers and the people above them, it's difficult to perform at the highest level. And I think it got to the point where players felt like it was affecting, and we felt that it was affecting the way our players were performing.
One last part of that, and that is, I've played some semi-pro baseball, so I know how hard this game is. I mean, it's to me, it's the toughest game to play. But you had a lineup where the first half of the season, Polanco killed you because he left a ton of men on base. Lieber killed you most of the season because he left the men on base. And then you had a tremendous strikeout problem with the entire team, but mainly with your three power guys, Abreu, Tomey, and Burrell, who probably struck out over 500 times among them. Right. Now, Manuel's supposed to be a real good hitting coach. What have you done, or what can you do to cut down on these strikeouts?
Well, this is something that people have to be cognizant of. Striking out is a part of the game, and people talk about our strikeouts like we were the only team that struck out in the National League or the American League. The fact of the matter is, I think we were right in the middle of the pack as far as strikeouts are concerned. Yes, our big three, did they strike out a lot? Yes. Do we need them to produce better? Probably yes. But we also went through a stretch where Bobby Abreu was being maligned every single day, and he might be the best single hitter in all of baseball. People don't think that, but because people say negative things about him, and I don't know where they come from, people lose sight of what these guys bring to the table. Jim Tomey did have 40 home runs and 100 RBIs. Pat Burrell struggled for the latter part of the season, but he began to make some strides. Late in the season, he hurt his wrist, but he had a little bit better season, and we hope to see him progress and become a better player. He needs to. I mean, he has to for us. Charlie Manuel has a way about him as a motivator and as a teacher, not just with regard to mechanics of the game, but also the mental part of the game. As you know, because of the game is so mental, and a lot of people talk about this. 80% of the game of baseball is mental, and 20% is ability. Because when you get to this level and you're a major league player, it really does. I mean, I was a great minor league hitter. I couldn't hit in the big leagues because mentally I was beaten every time I got to the plate, unfortunately, until I got my feet wet enough to start believing in myself. But it's a tremendously mental sport, and if people are feeling confident about their abilities, I have seen Charlie do things with Jim Tomey and Manny Ramirez and Kenny Lofton and Omar Vizquel, to take these guys and help them become the types of incredible offensive producers that is necessary to have a successful team. And we felt like having his presence and having him around was certainly going to help us do that.
And don't trade Ryan Howard. hold on to the bat.
We're not trading him.
Let's hear it for Ruben Amaro.